All right, hello everybody. April 11th, SIG Automation Package Management Subproject for Nephew. Okay, so today is a sort of big start of the sprint. So we wanted to look at the sprint board and start the sprint planning. So other than that, I don't have any real agenda. Let me present this. Okay. All right. This is today. Tomorrow we're going to have a UI meeting at 8 a.m. Pacific. If anybody's interested, we were going to do it Friday, but there was some miscommunication on the timing. So that's going to be a deep dive into the code and how the UI works. Yeah, if anybody's interested, please feel free to join. All right. So let's take a look at this sprint board. I guess it doesn't matter to make it wider. So I think we ended up probably carrying over a number of things, but overall, I think Fish was, I just saw on Slack, was asking about like, what's the overall theme? I think, I mean, that could be something we talk about tomorrow, but in the meeting, but I think from a discussion across, I think, different SIG chairs earlier this week, or maybe it was somewhere else, I don't know. We talked about the idea of having, actually it was in SIG release yesterday. We talked about having, at the end of sprint 2, something, fully working for deploying workloads and even if all the pieces aren't there for each individual, we can't do everything yet, but we've got first light and we can get some package or some workload up and running. Does that sound about right, Wim, from what we talked about yesterday, or Tal, in SIG release?
Yeah, that's the starting of integration test, as I call it, right? Or as I understood it.
Yeah, I think we should be able to begin that integration test in some capacity.
Right. Okay. So that's kind of the theme. So going along that theme, if we look at this list, I think a lot of that work comes down to SIG release actually work and SIG and specialization subproject work. In this subproject, we have the basic package variant functionality and package variant set functionality from Porch that actually, it doesn't do everything we need because we can't do config injection, for example, with the way it is now, but it does support enough that we can deploy workloads to a single cluster and just fix the values that would have been injected in the original source package for testing purposes. So we don't have a direct dependency here, but other than I think any bugs or end type of issues that come up. Does anybody see a dependency that I'm not seeing that we need to deliver out of this in order for us to achieve the goal of Sprint 2 out of this subproject?
See, the cluster, so for us, the cluster context is important. What we could do is create a package which just has it, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. We can work around if we don't have config injection. I'm hoping, the problem is I'm on vacation next week, and the other folks who are interested in participating in it have CLA issues and can't necessarily be poking around, unfortunately are limited in what they can do in there right now. And so it puts us in a little bit of a bind. I'm hoping to get actually some version of it built and running by the end of the week for the config injection piece, which is the thing we really need. But if you take a look at the design, it's a fairly substantive change from, I think I haven't pushed my latest updates, which I'll do later today after this meeting. So there's, the overall design has a fair bit of work in it, but just to get the config injection piece done for package variant might be achievable. We'll see. Unless you know, some other folks want to jump into that pool and don't have the CLA constraints that unfortunately we have right now with the Google CLA as opposed to the Navio CLA for Porch contributions. Where did I lost my window? So anyway, yeah, so the workaround one would be just what you said, right? Create a package where we just put those values in and they don't have to be injected, they're just there. So we're not exercising the ability to create the variants that are different across the different clusters. We're just exercising all the downstream specialization functionality.
So basically we'll be using one workload cluster and just start with that.
Or 3 identical workload clusters. Yeah, like where the cluster config isn't different, right? Where they don't use different site codes for their IPAM or whatever. Either way we want to do it. Like I said, I'll try to get that done. I just can't. It's a little.
Got it. Yeah. So understandable. I just want to understand. So that is there. There's one other thing I wanted to highlight. In the to-do list, I added support for other 5GC network functions. 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth and sixth items. So
Okay.
that is, yeah, that is for everything else. So basically, if Orange, Eric from Orange comes with some good news, and if we can just pre-populate, to me, I mean, if we get to that conclusion from Orange, that's a low-hanging fruit. We can implement. We can put that. That's another thing we could consider as a victory for the sprint, if that happens.
That would be fantastic. Yeah. Okay. So all right. Well, so let's go through. If possible, I do want to keep this to 30 minutes. We allocated for it. So let's look at those to do. These are in progress. These were pulled over from the previous sprint, so we can go through those in a minute. But like probably, Paula, we should go through the ones you added here in the to do. Yeah. So Stephen, is Stephen here? I don't see him. I'll try to sync up with him later.
Yeah.
But yeah, we definitely need like this. Is this an umbrella one or something?
Yeah, one is let's see.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how do you think, Bala, we should do this? Should we schedule these umbrella ones or just schedule the ones underneath it and just use these for tracking?
Yeah, I mean, I had the same question. What do you think, John? I mean, probably we should. It sometimes it's confusing. I understand if you put the umbrella one too. Probably, yeah. Just to avoid confusion, we can just do the individual stuff. Or what do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. To me, it's a little confusing. Or maybe we just need to name these such that.
Is it like an epic and a stories under the epic? Is it probably?
Yeah, like name it epic or something. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'll do that. Yeah, that's a good idea.
It's a label that you probably need to add saying it's a.
Yeah.
Another thing is initiative, right? Bala, that you were talking. Initiative is the one. Initiative, epics, and then.
Yeah, theoretically, Prow should retitle that for me.
Yeah.
We'll see. If it doesn't work, then I have the permissions to edit it, but not everybody does. So I would prefer to have that work. But okay. Okay. Yeah. So let's do that. All right. So Stephen's not here. I'm gonna volunteer him, and I'll sync up with him later and see if that works. And then this.
That's the actual.
Stay there for now. Yeah. I guess that's part of that design. Is that right? Okay.
Yes, that's a part of the.
Yeah. And then here you're saying, okay, so this is another like epic one. Is that? Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. So, well, whether Orange does it or not, then we probably want to do it, right? So
Right. Right.
we can't sign Eric up for it. We don't know who will be assigned to it yet, I guess. But
I think we should wait for, in my view, probably we should wait to, he said he's gonna get back to us this week, right? So that's what he told. Probably we can wait to hear from him. What do you think?
sure, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. We'll leave it in the to-do.
Yeah.
And then
Or
research
do you think
editors.
do you think we should just tentatively assign it to Eric? If he's not in the call, it's kind of maybe rude. I don't know.
We can assign it to him for now, but
Okay.
he might say he can't do it.
Exactly. Okay.
Yeah,
Let's do
I
that.
think-
Yeah, I think at least we will get an answer to.
Okay. There it is.
I don't know how you do this, John, with command line, remembering all the IDs. I can't do that.
Yeah, well, so I've been doing it with, because they're all the same ones from it doesn't seem to be working, but usually Prow has been working for us, so I'm kind of surprised. I mean, I've been doing it on the Kubernetes thing for 4 or 5 years now, but if you go to you go here, I do have to go here fair bit to remember what the heck they are. So here they all are. So
Okay.
So you do have a cheat sheet.
Okay. Got it. Okay. I usually pretty often resort to the UI. So
Yeah. Well, the problem is that yeah, it did work. Okay. It just doesn't update this panel. This can be done by basically anybody in the project, whereas these edits and stuff only appear for people with well, I think the reality is I think I gave everybody triage access, which means you can mess with labels and stuff, and we're small enough, I think we can do that, but eventually, we might have to be a little more restrictive. Okay, and then the UI one, I see Ganesh just joined. The UI one, I don't see here. I think we'll find out after tomorrow, after we go through the UI deep dive, whether Sahir can commit to doing some of these editors. Of course, I don't have my design 100% done, but I will have it done probably in the next day or two. I'll have it pretty much done today. And package variant set. Package variant is done. Package variant set is not done. So again, we'll leave this in the to-do. For now, I guess we'll talk to them tomorrow and see who we assign that to. If Chris is going to do it, or if Sahir can do it, we'll see. Okay, I guess that's it on the to-do items.
Yeah, I think there are other UI stories too, John, but I think I did not do that yet, thinking that these are highest priority right now, and then probably I will populate the backlog with other UI stories as well.
Yeah, and I think we'll have a better idea after the UI call tomorrow.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I realized it did not go through last week. That's why I was not too. I wasn't too eager to populate them because I thought that may change based on the discussion.
Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Makes sense. Okay, let's go through the rest then. So do we have Sandeep?
Yeah, on the UI front, basically just a suggestion. If you have anybody that is a user experience designer who has actually had it in the past, that might be something that could provide some good insights for this discussion.
So that would be super, super helpful. Right now, we're tactically just like, hey, let's take what we got and do the minimal changes needed to it to make it useful for the user stories of R1. But I think we have a bigger question of what do we want the Nefio UI to be? What we did in the workshop and what we're doing in R1 is just basically using the Porch UI. And then what we talked about was that's a Backstage UI. So Backstage is a sort of UI framework for building platform portals from Spotify. It's an open source thing. So what we talked about for R1 is creating a separate panel for like the NF topology resource management and things like that. But that's just very sort of staying in the lane we're already in. Like if we have like a real UX designer, then that could be really nice to have a conversation about this. So you have somebody, Vish, that might be interested in helping out?
It was a suggestion because of my very early on in my career. We used to use this, while I was in my company, use this user experience design group. People come in, they would actually look at it, they would ask the right questions. I don't know of anybody, but I know of somebody out there. I can ping them and ask them, hey, do you want to be part of this community? But if there is somebody inside of Google that you are aware of, like Chris Fry is aware of, it might be useful to bring them in, because usually
we have UX designers, but they're kind of
there is two things. One is they actually
hotly sought after resource. It might be challenging to pull them into an open source project because they're have a big backlog on internal stuff. But I'll take a look at that.
Okay.
I think that part of this comes down to, and we're running a long time, but part of this comes down to we need to understand better what our users want, and I don't think I don't understand that as well.
That is where those people will come in, because they know how to frame the questions, ask them, make them go through that,
right,
and do the exercise. So
I think we should engage with SIG1 is actually my point. I think we should engage with SIG1 and say, hey, we need you to help us figure out what kind of UI is useful to the telcos, really is what it comes down to. Yeah, Ganesh.
Yeah, I think, John, it's a very valid point, because as we were discussing earlier, this will serve as a base for the developers, right? Like the UI developers, like which will even like help them not get into the core concepts, to understand every concept of Nephew,
right,
rather than just look at the UI design and just start the development. That would be ideal way, to move. That would be ideal way, but there is always the other way around as well. Like, so it'll also help our team to understand, like Sakir and all, to understand Nephew, and also you'll also be able to suggest. That's another way. But if you have some design-based development, that will be quicker, right? Like quicker, and will effectively figure out what exactly is needed. And yeah, I think like you were suggesting, like SIG1 inputs.
Yeah, I'll send a request to SIG1. To like, hey, can we start to engage on that? Obviously not for R1. For R1, we know we'll keep it tight.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. Do we have Sandeep Sharma? I see a different Sandeep. Okay.
Sandeep said he'll not be able to attend, I guess.
Okay. Do we have an update here? Okay. Well, I'll contact him I'll follow up with him on Slack, I guess. Yeah, we talked about this. We're gonna have a meeting tomorrow. We'll know more about that then. This one.
Between yesterday and today, Ravi and I spoke, because we brought this up yesterday as well. And we're going to actually have a conversation with Victor, who is...
he's on PTO right now. So
yes. But he messaged me saying, hey, I found a way to work on a couple of hours. I feel very bad for him that he has to work. I wish he enjoys his vacation. But I know we probably can help out on this. So we will have responded back to Victor when he becomes available. Myself and Ravi will talk to him. And actually this morning, Ganesh also actually messaged saying that, hey, we can help out in this area. So it looks like we have a lot of help there.
Excellent. Awesome. So I did talk to Victor on this item. So he's got a repo he needs to do a few little changes on. He's waiting for confirmation, official confirmation, but he got sort of word of mouth confirmation. He's waiting for official confirmation that he can contribute it directly, and then we can pull that whole repo over for the Nephew admin tool. So which
So Ravi,
is
did you want to add anything else to what I said?
No, I just that I thought this 22 was the parent
Yes, yes.
work item, right? Yeah, now I see it as two different. In the last sprint, I thought it was kind of clubbed into the 22. So probably, I mean, probably to relate, it's good to relate them so that it's all under the same umbrella. So.
yeah, this gets it's that same thing. We like whether we. I think it might be here. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Hmm.
So we haven't quite figured out how to use the management tool the right way. Okay.
Yeah.
So
the idea was to, yeah, no, I mean, we wanted to even discuss with how those set of requirements are getting kind of fulfilled in the design that he has presented. So we're waiting for that meeting with him.
okay. Okay. All right. Well, hopefully, yeah, we'll get more on that. It looks like, is there a hand up, or is that a stale hand, Ganesh, or?
No, just this is the second time I just raised it now. It's okay. I just want. I know we discussed the same question like maybe like 2 weeks ago. Maybe because there is some new conversation with Victor and also conversation with Ravi. Maybe it's a little bit matured, but for example, in the context of workshop, one Summit workshop. So how is the installer different from this existing task of dependency? Can we? Is it okay? Just
The
to
installer is.
Yeah, installer, in my view, I wrote up a little bit in that text, Ganesh, is installer should not make assumptions about clusters. Is basically, it's installer is just about Nephew packages. You can point it to a management cluster and a workload cluster. It needs to deploy the right artifacts. Whereas versus sandbox is opinionated. It could be all kind clusters, all I mean, a sandbox is basically, obviously, when you deploy the sandbox, you'll get the kind clusters themselves deployed with a few components. But whereas the installer is a set of scripts that that can set up any Kubernetes cluster as a Nephew management cluster, and also set up the workload clusters with the right artifacts such as config sync and the other the edge watcher stuff. So I mean, there is that is one thing. The other thing is
okay.
That was my original thing, but John has slightly different ideas about setting up the edge clusters, also using the Nephew itself to set it up.
Yeah,
That's
but
their philosophy.
you could do it either way. So I think we could still use the installer, right? Like there can be both types of processes.
Yeah.
Okay, so it would be safe to say that the installer will use some of these packages and instructions that the task is developed as part of this task. The installer will use it to set it up on any clusters that they want, right?
Yes.
It's going to be independent, right?
Yes, it should use it. Yeah.
Okay, makes sense.
I just
Thank you.
it's with me just in the sandbox, right? Of course we created kind cluster, but if you remove the task and just give kube config files, the rest will just be the same. So the whole thing was designed to be independent of the kind cluster. So in other words, what you see is when you create those playbooks, we splitted them, and one is create clusters, but all the rest remains the same. Of course, you have to give new packages, but so what you can do in the playbooks is if you basically say, instead of relying on the kube config files that come from the kind cluster creation, you inject different ones for each of them, the rest remains the same.
Yeah,
and then we have a reusable component from it.
So before I forget, can you please add that comment in that story if you don't mind?
Yeah, okay. I was not involved in the installer so far, but I more on the
just-
deployment.
yeah,
Okay, I will do so. I will do so.
Okay.
Yeah. Just
Is a starting point, I mean, saying that clusters are there, or I thought you have to start from actually installing an EKS cluster or GKE cluster or something, even in Azure or whatnot, right? We're assuming that the cluster is already there, because that's what, at least in the Ansible scripts, we kind of provision the cluster to. I was thinking,
Ravi, here's my view. It is my view a little bit. We should decouple. So it's always the same. If we decouple the concerns into pieces, right? So one is setting up clusters. In the one summit, we decided to use kind clusters because it was easy, right? if at some point we say we need other cluster, you basically change that playbook and you basically deploy other clusters, and you can use maybe a controller to do so or whatever, right? But then you have the other pieces that install the right packages onto it, deploy the Git repos and blah, 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 blah. That should remain the same. So in other words, for me, I look at this as a layered approach.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I try to design the playbooks around it, is to basically to agree on that layered approach, so that you can rip out one of the layers, the rest should stay the same.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah,
Otherwise we rework always. We come up with a new installer that is 500 ways to do it, right? And I'm not saying that my approach is the right one, but at least we have battle tested it to a certain extent. And
yes.
if you just build upon it, then we don't have to rework it every time we have a new installer ID or something like that.
Yeah, I think it's actually the same layered approach is being used. The main difference is that this thing, the tool he's built, is it's a standalone tool, so it doesn't have any dependencies on Ansible or any of those things. So.
The only concern, I mean, I think the new things we hear would be, all the authorization. If you're doing with this, the other hyperscalers, any hyperscaler, then the authorization and the authentication, those things probably would be the new issues to handle.
Well, this isn't doing that layer, as far as I understand it.
Okay, yeah, no, if you don't, if you start with the cluster, then I think a lot of you just need the kube config.
Yeah, that's way simpler.
You're right. Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. Probably that could be the assumption. I mean, with the other ones, with the ones that goes into our own VMs, that goes from ground up. But the other ones, I think we could start from kube config.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. Okay. All right. So we're just about. I do want to try and keep us to 30 minutes. Should keep us honest. So let's try to push through the rest here. I think Liam had something here. I don't know what the status is. Whether there's.
Yeah, I put up a new or a new. I'm into that. They're basically your comments, John. I was off the last few days. It was Easter holidays here, so
that's right.
It's up there. It's up there now. There's just a comment as well from Vim around the naming, but we can do that. I don't think we need to take people's time here. We can do that in the comments and the PR.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's fine. Okay, so then this, like I said, I plan to try to implement this this week. This design proposal is that one's merged. There's a newer one here. Let me find it. So I'm working on finishing up that design proposal. Yeah, well, so that's actually going along pretty well. I'll have that. The package variant piece of it's done. The package variant set is well underway. I'll push a change in a little while to that PR, and pretty happy with how it's coming together. It is a fairly complicated mechanism, but in the details, but conceptually, I think it's not too bad. So would love anybody to take a look at that. And okay, any other comments? I have a few action items for myself here. Reaching out to SIG1 for UX and UI design type of thing, as well as there's some, I think, Bala, did you want to rework these with the Epic and all of that stuff?
Yes, I will. Yeah, I'll rename the thing something like umbrella issue so that we know what we can disambiguate. I'll do something. I'll choose something. If it doesn't work, we'll see. Yeah.
Okay. Would it be useful tomorrow for me to go through the package variant set pieces, the design in the meeting after, assuming we have time? I think the function runtime is more important. We should do that first. And if we don't use the whole time, we probably don't have time to do both of those. But if it's useful, would people find that useful? I could probably do that at some point.
I think so. Yes.
By the way, John, could I get 5 to 10 minutes just to see whether the approach that I have makes
Yes.
sense or not? Because but I don't know if you're finished, right? So please finish.
Yeah, no, I'm done. So unless, yeah, I just gonna say if there's anybody who has any questions, or do we feel we know what we need to do in this sub-project over the next 2 weeks? If there's no questions, anybody can drop. And Wim, you want to stay on, or you want to do it separately?
No, we can stay on. Yeah. It might be interesting for people to understand. So so the reason of this is this is just to test. I think I just wanted John's feedback on the approach that I have. For those who participated on the function runtime, I think the name will probably change to something with SDK, right? But so what in that, I'm not going to repeat, otherwise we'll stay for way longer.
Yeah.
But my plan is to at least have so some concept. So I'll repeat tomorrow much more detail. But so I try to draw here the approach that we had so far, and it was a bit taken from the One Summit. Is that so an interface. So maybe I'll explain what the approach that we had so far, and that's why we came up with this upstream and downstream functions. And as such, people didn't like that because it's too opinionated of things. But so one of the reasons we ended here was the following. If you look to the flow that we had, is we have an interface, like say N3, and that interface function runs actually once, and it says, I'm creating, I need IPs and VLANs, and I probably need an NAD that is a result of that, right? So for NADs, it doesn't have all the context, so it just creates a condition. And for IP VLAN, he has the right context, so he creates both the resource as well as the condition. And then when the IP comes along, the NAD function sees, okay, I have the IP for the NAD, so I create an NAD, and that's how it recycles. But what you see is that there is never feedback to this interface. So this just goes through, and then NF deploy needs to know, hey, there was an IP VLAN requested here, so he needs to inject it here. So you see that it becomes the clear responsibilities are a little bit blurred.
Okay.
If you see
okay.
what I'm seeing, right? Now
Yeah.
I created a new approach,
Okay.
which is documented here. And the reason what I want to test is this. So
the boxes, just to be clear, the boxes are functions, and the ovals are resources.
The other way around is actually the circles. The ovals are the functions, okay. And the rectangle-ish thingy is the conditions associated with them. Okay?
Conditions and functions, but cluster context, there's not a function for that. It's a resource.
No, correct. So it's a little bit, this drawing is not up to date, and this was one of the things. Maybe we could set
resources and conditions, not okay. I just need to. I just
we
want
could.
To know what...
We could set a condition, but correct. So this is not 100% correct at the moment. But so what is important as a flow is the following: is that take interface again as the base, right? So today what happens? So interface says, I know I need an NAD, so he will create a condition. And he knows I need an IP VLAN for it, so he creates a condition and a resource, basically. Yeah. So the drawing is really is not 100% good, right? And then the IP VLAN function acts upon it, creates the allocation, right? And then the NAD will act upon it and create the NAD and sets the condition to true. What I'm proposing right now is that this interface function should run basically 2 times. And depending on the input it has, it will come up with different, potentially different outputs. Of course, if all so the approach is the following, is that the condition of this interface remains false, even if it's run, as long as these conditions of these, let's say, child resources haven't been resolved. Right. And only then it actually, he by itself will put the condition to true if those things are met. Okay. Which means, and it also writes the IP and the VLAN status in its own CR, rather than having something else sitting here that then someone else needs to be dependent upon. So it's more the team of a controller that actually, so these are owner resources that that they use in order to get feedback on resources that they need. And as a result, NF deploy, which is the at the moment the last one in this chart, will just have to look at all its resources that it depends upon and just see whether the conditions are true, and there could be some without the condition. But for me, the fundamental thing is, can you have this feedback loop or doing it twice? Which is, yeah, that's, I think, the most important question.
I think yes. So I think that, so let me see if I understand. Let me say it back to you and see if I understood.
Yeah.
You're saying that previously interface just sort of served as input. There was an interface function. It looked at the interface resource and it generated an IP and a VLAN request, and it generated a NAD condition. And then there was the IPAM allocator controller, VLAN allocator controller that resolved the condition on the IP and the VLAN, wrote it back to the status there. The NAD, there was a NAD function that monitored the IP and the VLAN and the interface.
No, not the interface anymore. So cluster context, cluster context, because it needs the interface. So it needs the CNI, right?
Okay, the NAD took IP, VLAN, and CNI. Created the NAD. But now what? But previously NAD.
So the NAD and the IP VLAN do the same thing as before. What is different is that the interface will not set its condition itself to true anymore once it runs once. So it basically says it's false, but I know my child resources that I created as a result of my run. I want those conditions to become true before I put myself to true.
I think that's a great, yes, I think that's a totally great use of the conditions within those resources. It's a coordinating resource. The coordinate.
Yes.
And so it's saying, are my dependencies met? And then
correct. So it's like a controller. So these are like, these are child resources of this guy at the end of the day, right?
Right.
And it's only when they are, so it's like a controller. Normally, when you create this, they get feedback, and the feedback results then in the status update of that parent resource. So I'm following that pattern. And by doing that, I can get rid of this upstream and downstream completely, I think.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, no, I like that. I like that. And so then the NF deploy one, it only has to, it understands interfaces and not IP, VLAN, and NAD directly.
That's correct. So in other words, he is only looking at interface, DNN, and capacity, and everything that's intermediately created as a result to satisfy this guy, he is not aware about.
Okay, no, that makes sense. One other question I would have is, does it make sense? And this is legitimately a question. Like I don't know the answer. I don't have even an opinion. Right now you have NAD dependent on IP VLAN. Would it make sense, since you're copying the results of the allocation back into the interface, for NAD to just depend on interface?
Yeah, so, okay.
Or is that circular? I don't know.
No, it's not circular at the end of the day, because NAD will get a condition, right? And he by itself knows that he needs an IP and a VLAN, so he will resolve that by itself. So it's not really circular as such, because the feedback here is actually, the arrows are not 100% correct. So I just create a sketch sure. A few minutes ago. So it's not so the only feedback loop that is there is actually the condition true. And depending on the interface, for example, the IP and the VLAN would be written in the status of that interface spec, such that this guy here will only look at interface, including the status, and doesn't have to look at any of the other resources. So that is true. So that
makes sense to me. What I was asking is whether you can further decouple and just have
whether
things be interface to IPVLAN and interface to NAD. And I don't know if it's useful. Like it may not be a valuable thing to do. I'm just asking the question of to think about it, whether it would be, because it would be even a slightly simpler, right? Like the relationships.
Yeah, okay, I see what you're saying. I'm
not sure it's better
about it. Yeah, I need to think about that. But yeah.
But the general concept, yes, I think that the iterative, like, okay, right, every time that these conditions get reevaluated every time the package is saved. So whenever when the IP allocator allocates the IP, it writes that status. All the functions get run again. The interface can then pull that value in, and it can check. Oh yeah, those are ready, but the NAD's still not ready. The question is, we got to make sure that, do we need to do, which order those functions run in?
In this case, it's not really important, but sorry, Bella, may I quickly answer and then I'll come back to you. So what is the difference right now is one is this feedback loop, but it means that in order for that condition to be satisfied, they might have to run 2 or 3 times or 4 times. So they might have to run multiple times before that condition is actually met. That's the other difference. So, but the order doesn't really matter for us.
So that's what that's exactly the point. I want to make sure that in the natural course of events, enough runs happen that it fully resolves. And the ordering might matter there. Like you might want to run the interface at the beginning and at the end. You can run it twice if they're idempotent, right? You might have to do that.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, you could. I mean, you could. Yeah, sorry, Bella. You could write a cap file that has it multiple times in it if you want, but I don't believe it has to be done. And we have to test, of course. So
we'll see as we go forward. Okay.
Yeah.
So
sorry, Bella.
Architecturally, if you can make a statement, a parent can only set all the status to true only when all its child it is responsible for, they have satisfied their condition. So if you say that, if you make that architectural statement, then if interface is responsible for creating, in this case, VLAN and NAD, right?
Yes.
And then obviously interface is not completely, it cannot set status to true until their children. For example, if there is such relationship between NAD and IPVLAN, for example, say but yeah, in this case, IPVLAN does not create NAD, right? So okay,
no.
I understand. So essentially, that's the architectural statement, right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
So
I also updated this drawing. By the way, you see the difference between the previous, so it's still there. So this is the new drawing, so it's way cleaner as well, by the way, I think.
Yes, so anything it owns, the condition has to be satisfied.
Yes, before it writes itself, it satisfies itself to be true.
Yeah.
And that's also how, in my view, a little bit the controller behaves. Let's say if you would do this in a controller, you create an interface, and I need an IP allocation, you create an IP or a VLAN resource, and then there's another controller active upon it. If you create a owner reference on that thing and you create a own watch, you get feedback. And only when that's satisfied, you basically write the status to true. So it's the same pattern that is used there. So and that one helps to create a single, let's say, runtime or SDK or whatever we call it.
Is there anything from deployment and pods? And deployment composes of pods, right? Is there anything that we can leverage from there?
It's similar, so it's a parent and child resource. So it's the same relationship we built here.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, well, I was just wondering whether you would have a problem with running it multiple times to get to the final result, but I didn't see a real problem. But I just wanted to double check.
I think we're going to have to anyway because we've got allocations coming in and. Like we're simulating reconciliation watches by changes to package, right? Like, and so the main concern is just that we do converge, that we don't need like just extra random run at the end, right? And that's what I mean by like, you can fix that by putting the parent one multiple times in the pipeline or at the end of the pipeline or whatever, if you have to.
By the way, the reason why I put cluster context here, John, is the following. In the injector you are designing, I haven't looked to the design yet, but I will do. You could actually say condition true when you inject it. So you could actually even follow the same pattern.
Yeah, actually, that is part of the when it's injected, it will get set to true. So there's two different in the current design, you can have required injection points and optional injection points. So an optional injection point means that the value in the package serves as a default. And so the condition gets set to true whether you inject or not. Whereas the required ones only set the condition to true if an actual injection happens.
Right. Yes, and so we could use that as a way to convey the status, because right now we are just looking at cluster context existence, but we could on top of that look at the condition, because then that whole pattern can be applied from the beginning all the way to the end. It's the same pattern.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, good.
So I have one observation, rather one question. One question and the statement as well. So from a purely philosophical angle, John, does it violate any principles of functions? So that is one question. In terms of what it has to do one thing, it has to do one thing well, it has to be hermetic in nature, things like that. That is one thing I wanted to ask. The second question is, if it plays into any of those philosophical things, or it's not supposed to do this, that kind of a thing, same workflow we can encapsulate by having a final function here. For example, interface, there is interface here, so VLAN here and NAD here, and there could be a finalized function here. That finalized function is going to get everything together, and that's what NF topology works on.
NF deploy is kind of a finalized function in this design. You see it? I even have finalize in here, so it's kind of that.
Not NF topology there. Instead of running NF interface
NF deploy
there, NF deploy. Sorry, if you go back to your original diagram, instead of running interface twice, I was thinking if there is some kind of a finalizer on this particular workflow here, instead of running interface twice, can we run that, which will bring all things together? I was asking only because if it makes it a cleaner design, and if it makes,
I think we're okay. Like interface manages that. Basically, the interface function manages getting that interface condition to true, which means creating those IP requests, those VLAN requests, and those NATs. And I think that's a single purpose for that function. And the question was just whether it gets invoked, in a dynamic like controller type environment. It would be watching its NAD, its child things, and if they get changed, they evolve through their status, it would get notified and it would invoke its reconciliation. But because we're not in that situation, if you have the interface function listed, then the IP function listed, then the VLAN function listed, then the NAD function listed, and you run through that pipeline, interface has already run by the time NAD does its last thing. So you might actually need to run interface last, like you might need to do it in reverse order of parent. So run the child ones first and then the parent, but then the first run through, the interface is going to make some new resources, and you're going to want those functions to do something with them, but those functions won't run. So that's what I mean by, like, it's not clear to me. But that doesn't necessarily mean we need a different function. That's what I mean by, if you sort of run the interface, it's really just we're working around the fact that we're not in a real cluster with real watches. We're saying, hey, interface needs to produce a bunch of requests, And then at the end, it needs to reap the results of those requests. And so unless we know we're going to run one last time after all of those functions have done all of their things, we probably need to run it a second time at the end. I still suspect that might be the case, but I don't think that violates any of those. In fact, it relies on the idempotency.
Yes. Yeah. Because the flow normally is the following. First of all, the IPv is not in the kept pipeline.
Right.
Because it's a controller, right?
Correct. Yes.
So the way or philosophically, the way it's designed is that this guy sets, so this runs and assume these don't exist, okay? What he will do is he will create IPv and set a condition to false for this. And yeah, so it sets to false. He will set this to false, okay? What will happen is none of them will do anything unless the IPv controller has done. And so when this satisfies it, he will change the condition, right? When the condition changes, the package will rerun, right? Now, he will see NAD is not satisfied yet. IPv is fine. So he keeps silent. This guy will act because he sees that his IPv is now resolved. So NAD will, once it runs, it will set the condition to true, right? Now, the port, so the pipeline runs again. Interface now sees, hey,
but that's the point I need to ask is why would the pipeline run again?
Because the condition changed?
No, because NAD is running within a pipeline and it's setting the condition in that pipeline and it's done.
Okay, and so when is the pipeline run again then?
Only when a change is made to the package.
Okay.
And
but so in this case, there is a change into the package because the NAD will be created as a result of it, but it's not a given, is what you're saying. Yeah.
The change, that's a change part of that same pipeline run. And then we're done. And then there has to be another change to initiate another run of the pipeline.
But so the NAD will not be created. So this is a bit of a, I need to create three different things, but so the NAD resource is only created when this guy satisfies itself. So they go together. So in other words, exactly. The package will change.
So the IPv, the last IPv gets created by the controller. It saves the package. That runs the pipeline. Like you said, interface function runs. It stays silent because NAD is still not satisfied. IPv function, if there is one, I don't even know if there is one, doesn't do anything either. No. NAD function goes, aha, my IPv are there. I create my NAD resource and I'm done.
But it creates a new resource within the package, right? So
yeah, but that's within that pipeline run. It's not going to, it's within that one save of the package. It's not going to retrigger another save, right? So we don't run the package. We don't run the pipeline over and over until it stabilizes. Believe it or not, Morten and I just had this discussion last week. Should we run the pipeline over and over until it stabilizes? And we decided, we decided not to for now. But, and this isn't, we're not the first time we've had this discussion, because there have been other use cases where people want to generate a resource as part of the pipeline and then act on that resource again. So theoretically, maybe we should run the pipeline twice every time. It's idempotent. It should be safe to do that. But how many times do you run it? Twice, 3 times, 5 times, 100 times?
Yeah, sure.
And so we just punted on that. Sorry, there's a bunch of hands.
If there is one final function there, let's say, I don't want to call it, I'm just going to call function X that runs, say interface is done first, and obviously going to create VLAN, then the NAD is done first. NAD is done last in this particular case. And then after NAD, if there is one finalizer function that puts everything together and then acts that sets all the conditions to true. That's what
that is kind of violating that principle. Right now you've got multiple things managing those conditions, and that function has to be aware of everything. It has to become a super knowledge function that knows everything, and we kind of have broken out. We no longer have little independent things were chaining together. So I'm not,
I see what you mean. Okay.
yeah,
Can I
enthusiastic.
go next? So, Wim, when you're explaining this tomorrow, just a suggestion. If you are able to actually start off saying, hey, this is what a kept file looks like for this package where this is going to get applied, and these are the pipeline functions. And then you're able to, as you walk through the flow, if you're also able to call out like, okay, look, this condition got added to this kept file. If you're able to show that, that'll be great in understanding and mapping it, in our heads. I know there are things on the resource list also, I guess, that gets added. It might be a little bit too much, but at least on the kept file side of things, what is happening and what is out there, if you can call that out, that'll be great to understand this better. I know I recently was able to look through some of those documents, so I have a little bit of understanding, but now this will actually, in general, help even a little bit more as well for others, for wider scope. So
yeah, sure. But it means, yeah. So as a consequence, of what you're saying, John, is we have to define. So instead of doing upstream and downstream, we have to put the interface function in the before and after in the pipeline, and the same for DNN, by the way.
That would work. Yeah, that would work.
It's a bit
weird.
Yeah, but okay. I mean, this does the job. I think the question is, where do you build that knowledge, right? There's the other ways. I could create two functions. I create an upstream and a downstream function. That's the other way, but we'll have the same code or something. But so the question is, what is the most appropriate to do for us is creating this runtime, as we call it right now, simple, straightforward, and not make a distinction between upstream and downstream and stuff like that, and make it generic, and then add the dependencies in the pipeline? Or the question is, because we'll probably end up putting it somewhere. The question is, what is the most?
No, I get your point. Yeah, it's like where does that knowledge live? Does it live in the function runtime, or does it live in the use of the function runtime?
Yes.
I think that overall, this is a clearer, cleaner design. I think that, so I would prefer to go with this design, and as a workaround, potentially stick those parent functions both at the beginning and end of the pipeline. As a sort of like, well, I need to initiate some processing, and I need to button up the results of that processing at the end. It's not super clean because it requires a sort of understand, but I mean, if you have to understand what those functions are doing anyway, if you're building the pipeline. So I'm okay with that. That would be my preference, because it makes the runtime simpler to understand and use, I think.
That's also my view, and I think if I look to what I did with this function controller, if we would change the pipeline of kept to a more let's say advanced dependency thingy, we could solve it there, I think.
Yeah,
but we would.
Yeah, right now it's a simple list. Like we could do a lot.
It's just
more.
Yes, it's just a sequential list, right? So if we put a bit of more intelligence into it, it's I'm personally also a bit more in favor of this because it's way cleaner in my view.
Yeah, exactly.
But it will require us to put. Yeah, it will require us to put potentially the function twice into the pipeline.
No, just quick comment, Wim. I mean, this diagram, if you could clarify, because I was thinking the whole ones are controllers and the other ones are like kept functions. If you can clarify.
I will, Ravi.
Yeah. And also in the table that you have there, right? You have a matrix table. If you could, in this one also, if you could just spell out the controllers or they're all functions. I don't know. That's what is implied.
This is only the controller. The rest is functions.
Oh, okay. Yeah. It gives an idea because the other one's ephemeral. The other one basically is more persistent, right? And when you're discussing, I was thinking that because you're talking about this condition changing and dynamically, then when John said, hey, there's a dependency of when these packages are run, then I realized, okay, these are all functions.
It's a function, yeah.
Yeah.
Functions and controllers can serve very much the same, very similar purposes, but the context in which they run is so different. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Wim. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
All right. Anything else? We're well over time. Okay. Thank you all.
Yeah, thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.